How's it going, everyone? And welcome in for another edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. The eyes are red, the body is tired, the voice is raspy. That is because of the big game on Saturday that St. Mary's beating Gonzaga 74-67 to become the WCC outright champion. And the Spokesman Review also headlining it as the new WCC Kings. Was a wild night. My first personal trip to the Kennel to see St. Mary's play Gonzaga, and it was an incredible environment. If for those who have never done it, for those who are thinking about it, yes, obviously it is an incredibly tough ticket to get, but it is worth the experience to be in that building. The Kennel Club was amazing, as it normally is. Yes, of course, St. Mary's did kind of make them a little quieter than maybe they normally are, especially throughout the course of the game. But the experience at the Kennel was amazing, and that is a game I will probably try to make in the future a few more times. We had a good St. Mary's group who made the trip to go up to the Kennel, so that all of that part of it was really fun to kind of see in that building, being able to celebrate with St. Mary's in that building, a whole lot of fun as well. And then just the after party in Spokane at a number of locations before my early flight out on Sunday morning. So me recording this, just exhausted, tired, everything else, worth it to see that happen in person on Saturday at the Kennel. We'll talk a little bit. We'll get into some of the award season. We'll get some game previews in there as well. Santa Clara Gonzaga do play each other on Tuesday. USF Oregon State as well. We'll talk about seeding scenarios as well, as only 7 seeds. As 7 seeds are still up for grabs. Only 4 of them are locked in. One now being St. Mary's, 9 being Pepperdine, 10 being Pacific, and then 11 being San Diego. Those are the locks as of right now. So 7 still in the win, up for grabs in the next couple of days. So back to St. Mary's Gonzaga. It was the first time Gonzaga has been swept by St. Mary's since 2016. It is the first back-to-back outright WCC championships for St. Mary's in program history. 3 straight overall, also first time in program history. They have won 4 of the last 5 against Gonzaga. They have won back-to-back games at the Kennel. And the 74 points marks another milestone, as they are now 22-0 when they have scored 70 or more points. For a team that is now 25-4, 15-1 in the WCC, 3 games up on the field, which has given them enough to be the WCC champion. And thinking about this team, thinking about what they did, you look at what we saw on the court. We saw Gonzaga did well on the boards early, but St. Mary's wore them down. They ended up being plus 12. They had a 15-7 advantage on the offensive rebounds. They were much better from the free throw line. They were 12 for 15 from the line. They struggled trying to contain Graham Ike early. Mitchell Saxon did not defend him well. In that individual matchup, Ike was 6 for 9 against Mitchell Saxon, and because of those struggles, because of what we saw the double big be implemented pretty early and was pretty often in this matchup. Harry Wessels coming in and did very well against Graham Ike. Against Wessels, he was only 1 for 2. He had 2 turnovers. Yes, only 2 field goal attempts, but really what that was is just not giving him a window to shoot over the top. Wessels' 7-1 frame was just so large that Graham Ike just could not shoot over the top of him and was forced to pass back out or look for other options because they just were not there for him when he got matched up with Wessels in the post. Braden Huff was also not really an option in this one, as he was in foul trouble all game long, only 11 minutes in that in the contest. Yes, we can always point to what happened at the very beginning of the game. Joe Few starting on senior night, which is a tradition, was voted on by the players according to Mark Few. But it was the how long he was in that game was, yes, is curious. The fact that I thought it was going to be, okay, he's in the game, first time out, he's coming out. First whistle, he's coming out. That didn't happen. And he was left in long enough to cause a turnover or to turn the ball over once, and then also give up a 3-point play very quickly. They were down 9-0 in the blink of an eye. And yes, confusing. But I've also mentioned all those other things that did not go Gonzaga's way. And those all having a factor in this as well. Mikey Lewis being a part of the reason why Gonzaga did not win that game on Saturday night. Mikey Lewis is showing time and time again that he is built for these big moments. Every time he made a three, and there were a few of them, he looked back at the Kennel Club. He had the smile on his face before the game. Like he was relishing this sort of moment. Team high 18 points, 5 or 7 from three. You're starting to look at the St. Mary's squad, and what is starting to scream at me is the versatility of this team. The double big. You can go to Morauskas if he's hot. You can go to Hardaway if you need some length. You look at the backcourt. If you need a little bit more control, ball handling, Marshallonis and Ross. If you need that scoring, you can go to Lewis. If you need that grittiness, you have Barrett. You have a ton of options on this team based on what you need on a given night. And this is something that a lot of St. Mary's teams have just not had over the course of time. They haven't been able to give you necessarily different looks for different teams or different matchups. It feels like this team can now do that at will. And that is going to serve them well as the season continues to go along, as they get into March, which guess what, is only a couple of days away. And this is a squad that seems very capable now of not only getting back to a WCC championship game in Vegas, back to the NCAA tournament, but a 6 seed is where a lot of people now have them. I think they're now capable of getting back to a 5 if they were to win out. So that would, again, a 5 seed when they are 29-4 would be in that perfect scenario. They win the last 2 regular season games against LMU and Oregon State. And then, of course, the 2 in Las Vegas, the semifinal and the final, whomever of those 2 might be. And that's not to overlook the next 2 games. Obviously, LMU and Oregon State are not going to be pushovers. LMU has played very well in their building over the course of the season. They've beaten Nevada there. They've beaten Oregon State there. They've beaten Santa Clara there. They can play spoiler in this one, but they also have something to play for as well. They're 8-9 right now. They can still lock up the 6th seed with a win. If they don't win, they're in danger of slipping to the 7, or even, I think they can only slip to the 7. I'd have to take a look at the standings and everything else a little bit more closely, but they could slip out of that Saturday start and end up starting on Friday. So obviously that is not something that LMU is going to want to do. So no, there's no overlooking what the Lions are going to bring at Kirsten Pavilion in a couple of nights. And of course, Oregon State has not played well on the road, but that's still a team that's also playing for something right now. Let's say Oregon State wins their game against USF in a couple of nights. If they win that one, they will have the opportunity to go into the game in Moraga and for an opportunity to get one of the top 4 seeds. They're only 1 game behind Santa Clara for that 4 seed. So there is still something to play for if other components start to play in Oregon State's favor. Now back to the Gonzaga-St. Mary's matchup, because there's one stat that I kept looking at, and it still boggles my mind. Rush the Court tweeted out, quote, St. Mary's didn't just sweep Gonzaga, they dominated Gonzaga in this regular season. In the 2 matchups, St. Mary's led for 70 minutes, 11 seconds, while Gonzaga had a lead for 4 minutes and 45 seconds. That is just unreal. Gonzaga never led in the game again on Saturday. They never led. ended up tying it in the second half. St. Mary's had a 10-point lead, and Gonzaga was able to chip away and tie the game. Had an opportunity to take the lead in that moment, but were unable to do it. And obviously, St. Mary's was able to pull away late in that game. It's Gonzaga's first 4-loss regular season since 97-98. Gonzaga is now tied for USF for that second spot, only one game up on Santa Clara, and obviously they will meet each other on Tuesday. And this is Gonzaga is going to have to pick itself up off the mat and figure out what they can do moving into this game on Tuesday. And that's a Santa Clara team. Well, let's kind of get into what we saw the other night. Now, the other matchup, obviously mentioning that Santa Clara is going to be taking on Gonzaga on Tuesday, which is a huge matchup when it comes to the standings. Santa Clara still has an outside shot at being the 2 seed for the WCC tournament. That does start with them having to beat Gonzaga on Tuesday. And the Broncos are coming off a very impressive win on Saturday against Washington State. They won at the Palouse 109-79. They made 23 threes, which not only is a program record, it is a WCC record for a single game. They scored 61 in the first half alone. They were plus 17 rebounding. They had 22 assists. They moved the ball incredibly well. And what we also saw in this game early on was the Washington State careless turnovers all over again. We have continued to see just Washington State plummet in the standings. They have now lost 8 of 9, now tied with Portland for that 7th place spot. They do hold the tiebreaker against Portland. So if those two ended up finishing together, they would be the higher seed. Not at this stage, like considering where they are, they're both going to play on Friday. So really, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference for that one. The scenarios start getting interesting when you start thinking about what could happen with the 6th seed, which means a Saturday start rather than Friday. And obviously, both Washington State and Portland would rather be doing that than playing in that third round matchup, or I guess that would be the second round matchup starting on Friday, and that would be the winner of Pacific and San Diego. So yes, those two are locked in at 10 and 11, Pacific being the 10 seed, San Diego being the 11. Pepperdine is the 9 going in, and of course St. Mary's is the 1. So you have 7 seeds that still need to be locked up in the next couple of days before we know what's obviously going to be happening in Las Vegas. A ton of different scenarios that can still happen. Santa Clara obviously can get this one against the Zags. And this one in the first matchup was all offense, no defense. Santa Clara did win at the Kennel and scored 103 points in that one. They, at that point, had to hit their season high of 18 threes. Tyree Bryan went just nuclear with 35 points. A win against Gonzaga would give Santa Clara the sweep of the Bulldogs, and this would also place them in a tie for 3rd with Gonzaga. USF, because this game is on Tuesday, this would change the standings when it comes to USF, a difference by a half game. So Santa Clara would move up, Gonzaga would move down, so they'd both be a half game back of USF for 2nd place. The Zags did make a furious charge at the end of that game, so this is a Zags squad that's going to obviously remember what happened that night. They're going to also be coming off a loss to St. Mary's, and this is now turning into not necessarily a must-win because they're still safe for the tournament, but they need to show that they can kind of get back off the mat. And against a team that now has beaten them before, much like Saturday, a team that has already beaten them. And this is a Santa Clara team that went to the Kennel and won. Now they get to come home and defend home court against the same team. And based off what we saw over the weekend, Santa Clara is not going to be afraid of this squad. They know they can beat Gonzaga. They've picked up wins each of the last 2 seasons against the Bulldogs, one in the Levy Center, one at the Kennel. And yes, they do not have a Dama ball, or will likely not have a Dama ball for this game. But we have seen the pieces start to actually around them set up really well. We saw what happened the other night. I mean, Elijah Mahi has played really well in the stead of Adama Ball in that starting lineup. In that Washington State game, Mahi was really the distributor. And I really like the way this has kind of worked out for Santa Clara in that respect, because this is a team that kind of misses a ball handler, a true playmaker and distributor. He had 4 assists. He had 3 steals in that one, 19 points. He had 4 made threes, but everybody had a ton of made threes in that one. So he was just joining the party on that front. But he's a guy who can create for others. He doesn't need to score the basketball to be effective. And it allows the others, Tyree Bryan, Carlos Stewart, Johnny O'Neal, to be able to play a little bit more off the ball and not have to worry about as much one-on-one basketball. They had 22 assists in that game against Washington State. So a lot of the superlatives, a lot of the big numbers in that matchup. And, well, of course, when you score 109, and a lot of the numbers are going to look really, really good. And for Gonzaga, they need to get back to rebounding better than they did the other night. The minus 12 against St. Mary's, which obviously is not good, but St. Mary's is one of the better rebounding teams in the country, so maybe you kind of have a little bit of forgiveness on that front. But that's going to be something they're going to have to do well against Santa Clara. Santa Clara is also a decent rebounding team. This is a squad that is going to play well. They're going to defend that home court. I would think they're going to be really pumped up for that matchup. The Rough Riders are going to be ready. Turnovers are going to be a factor. Obviously, ball movement is going to be a factor. Both these teams move the ball really well on the offensive end. This feels like a game that's going to be run up into the 80s, maybe into the 90s. I would not expect a whole lot of defense in this one, which will make it very, very entertaining as we get deeper and deeper into that game. Honestly, I don't know who I would pick in this one. Santa Clara is playing well right now. I think Gonzaga just needs to almost find themselves, because this feels like it's going to be another close game, and we know what Gonzaga has not done in those scenarios. Now, Wednesday, the other matchup to look at is going to be San Francisco and Oregon State. This one up at Gill Coliseum, and these two, USF won the first matchup 81-70. Malik Thomas had 24. Marcus Williams had 21. Big circle, 3-point shooting. USF was 13 for 22 from 3 in the first matchup. Oregon State was 1 for 9 in that one, and that really was the difference in this one. USF really jumped on them in the second half of that game and was up by 20 at one point, but the Beavers were able to chip away and get back into that one. We know what USF has not been able to do on the road. They have not played nearly as well on the road as they have at home, where they did not lose a single game. Very much like Oregon State, that has played very well at home, but also has struggled on the road. So this could be a game where, now for USF, they need this game to set up the matchup on Saturday that could be their opportunity to get second place in the WCC. So this is a must win for them. And for Oregon State, this is a must win because there is an outside shot. There's still a chance. They're only a game behind Santa Clara for that 4 seed. If Gonzaga wins Tuesday and Oregon State wins Thursday, it does set up the opportunity for the Beavers to potentially slip into that 4 seed as well. So there is nothing set here about what we're going to see in this matchup. Even like looking at the 2 games, like if Gonzaga wins against Santa Clara, or Oregon State wins against USF, those 2 teams are tied. They both have wins against. They would both have wins against Gonzaga. They would both have wins against USF. They'll split with each other. We start to have to go down the list and to see like who's actually going to be the split between those 2, because in a way, I mean, the record's going to be almost mirror images of each other. But the opportunity on Saturday is probably going to be the one that is obviously going to favor Santa Clara a little bit more, because they were going to be at Pacific, and Oregon State is going to be at St. Mary's. So very, very different scenarios for both of those squads. just looking at the rest of like what we're going to see on Thursday, Pepperdine at Portland, huge game for Portland as they have won 4 of the last 6 games. They are tied for 7th. They still have an outside shot at that 6th seed, but they're going to have a lot of things go their way for that to happen. I think it's the way it would have to go is they have to win both of their last 2 games. Washington State has to. Let's see, if Portland wins. I was looking this over. All right, sorry, I looked at the wrong list, my wrong note. Portland clinching the 6th seed, they'd have to win both of their games and along with an LMU loss and a Washington State loss. If all of that happens, then yes, Portland can indeed end up being the 6th seed. But that's a lot of this, and this has to go right for that scenario to happen. And then the other game, the other game, San Diego at Washington State. This is one Washington State just needs. Their last 2 games are very winnable, but Washington State has just continued to struggle in these matchups. 8 of the last 9. The one is a 1-point win against Pepperdine. They do have to see Pepperdine again in Malibu on Saturday in their final regular season game. So this is going to be another big one for Washington State. Washington State is going to have their senior night on Thursday. So these two, Washington State and Portland, have a lot to play for. They still could get out of that 3rd round game and get to the Saturday start, but a lot has to go right for both of those squads. And really, it's about they have to win games, and Washington State right now is having a very, very tough time doing that. Now we're also getting into award season, and what we're going to see from the coaches as they start to pick who's going to be the player of the year, DPOY, and all that. And looking at what we have to this point, it's almost very easy to say St. Mary's is going to really clean up well in a lot of these awards. And I think that is what's likely to happen. The one I think that is very, very clear, very separated is DPOY, and that's Mitchell Saxon. I don't think there's even a negotiable second player for that unless you want to go with another St. Mary's player, because there really just has not been that other defensive guy that I think is stacked up to the level of a Mitchell Saxon. And I think maybe the other maybe most clear option is the newcomer of the year, and that just screams Paulos Morauskas. The performance he has had, he is second leading scorer on St. Mary's. He's the leading rebounder on this Gaels squad. Coming over from Arizona, he very clearly seems like the guy. I would throw in a Nate Calmese as a potential other to consider, as he's had a really good season for Washington State. But Morauskas, to me, is the clear separator in all of that. And then I think after that, maybe not, I think some of these are going to be a little bit more debatable, questionable, whatever you want to have it. And I'll start with the other two that are probably more St. Mary's leaning, and that's first Coach of the Year. Randy Bennett, obviously, WCC regular season championship. That obviously is the first feather in the cap. The only thing I think that could prevent Randy from not winning the Coach of the Year in this season is if either USF or Santa Clara were to end up in second place and leapfrogging Gonzaga to get into that spot. That is maybe the one scenario I could see where Chris Gerlifson is able to do that at USF, or Herb Sendek is able to do that at Gonzaga, that maybe one of them could snatch that Coach of the Year award. But that is assuming that they can get into second place, and I still think that is going to be a tall order against the Zags, even if both of those games are going to be road games for Mark View's crew. Now switch over to Freshman of the Year, which this is one there's two, I think, very clear candidates, and I would also put a third into that. The two that I think are clear as the top two candidates are Austin Rapp at Portland and Tyrone Riley, the fourth, at USF. Both of these guys have had a ton of opportunity, obviously being starters in for their respective teams. Austin Rapp is the second leading scorer for Portland. He's their leading rebounder. He's a very good three-point shooter. He's been kind of everything I think they could have hoped for in his first season on the Bluff. And he coming into that program, there was a lot of excitement, and he's met, I think, all of those expectations. So I think Austin Rapp very clearly is one of those candidates. Tyrone Riley, we can see the upside. We've seen him have huge games throughout the course of the season. He's fit a role well for the Dons. This is a team that is obviously doing well. They're tied for second place at the moment. So he's doing it for a better team than Austin Rapp. So he doesn't have quite the numbers, the individual statistics as Rapp does, but Riley's impact, you could say, has been greater just because of who he's playing for and really what we've been able to see on the offensive end and the defensive end from Tyrone Riley the fourth. And the only other one and the other consideration, obviously, I'm going to throw in Mikey Lewis into that mix as well. I do think that he's a little bit more of a distant third in this group with these two guys, only because he hasn't had the starters minutes, the amount of opportunity, even though obviously he has had two great games against Gonzaga. He's had his moments against Nebraska. He has had some really, really impressive performances. But at this stage, I just do not see, with the fact that he has been coming off the bench all season long and those two have been starters all season long, that Mikey probably would not fit in for the freshman of the year category. However, that's where I'm going to get to Mikey in a bit, is that he's probably one of the leading candidates for sixth man of the year because of those performances off the bench, because he has been a true bench guy all year long. That is someone I would consider as being one of the top candidates. The other one to consider there is going to be Elijah Mahi. Mentioned him just a bit ago. He has largely been coming off the bench for Santa Clara. He has had some spot starts when they've had some injuries. They've had some guys be banged up. Adama Ball, obviously, being that chief person that he has stepped in for. And he's played well when he's had those opportunities. And he is someone who can give it to you on the offensive end and the defensive end. He's a playmaker. He does a lot of things really well that has helped Santa Clara get to this point of the season. They, too, are also doing Mahi's doing something well for a team that is doing well. And that is going to be a huge part of it. Johnny O'Neill, I did also have kind of on this list, but I think like when you think of he has had more starts. And so I think because of that, I don't put him as high on the level for sixth man of the year as I would an Elijah Mahi. And maybe the other one I would at least have in consideration, although I do think it kind of took him a little bit of time to get revved up, is Ryan Beasley. The USF guard, we know like can be so explosive in a lot of these matchups. He's been their best player at times in some of these games, and Ryan Beasley is going to be a big star in this league. Him coming off the bench this season, last season, we've seen what he's capable of. Freshman of the year a year ago. This year, a little bit more, I think, solidified in what his role was going to be and who he is. Maybe not quite sixth man of the year this season. It would come down to Lewis or Mahi for me. I would personally, and maybe it's my bias, I would say Lewis on that front, but Mahi would be right there along with him. So that leaves player of the year, which a season ago, this was pretty controversial because Augustus Marciulionis was the player of the year ago, and many, including myself, would have picked Graham Ike to be that player of the year because of what we saw in WCC play, how dominant he was, how effective he was all season long. And I think there was definitely like the case was strong for that. And the case was at least one that could be had in a serious way. This year, I don't think you can have that conversation as strongly about Graham Ike because the fact that Gonzaga lost to St. Mary's twice. They have lost to Oregon State. They've lost to Santa Clara. They have more riding against him. Now, obviously, that's not all on Graham Ike, but it also does show that, I mean, St. Mary's, you look at what happened the other night, they actually did figure out how to play him a little bit better defensively, how to switch it up and make life more difficult, despite the fact that he had 19 points still on 7 of 11 shooting. Ryan Nemhard would be in the conversation as well, but I feel like his disappearing act at times late in games is something that can be held against him. The shooting numbers aren't great, and I think it's one of those moments of like, well, if you have another player on your team who also is one of those candidates, I think it's hard to pick either one of them. And that's always kind of like been something that is stuck in my head about players of the years, MVPs, whatever else. If there's two of them on your team, either one I don't think is going to get enough of the votes or get enough of the ride that they would need to be able to get the award. Michael Rataj, I think, is another great candidate for this award. He's been one of the best players in the league. One of the leading scorers, one of the leading rebounders. We know he can shoot from inside outside. Rataj has been amazing all year long. But to me, I think, and there's going to be the caveat, I think it comes down to two players, and it is, I think this year it becomes clear that Augustas Marciulionis is one of the two top candidates to retain his player of the year status from a year ago. He's on the best team. He is the leader of said team. And we have seen him come up in some of the bigger moments when the Gaels have needed him as well. Yes, his numbers are not as flashy as really anyone that I've already mentioned to this point, or anyone I'm even going to mention. But he continues to get the job done. And I think the one thing that is overlooked in this conversation, again, thinking about the numbers or whatever else, is his defense. Marciulionis is arguably one of the best defensive guards in the WCC, arguably maybe the best defensive guard in the WCC. And that is a component of his game that is overshadowed, not talked about all that much. And while you can say like that there's limitations in his game or whatever else, the bottom line is he gets the job done more nights than not. And that's why he is back in this conversation, why he is going to be one of those last two guys, I think, for the Player of the Year award. The only other one I have that I think would be the serious contender, and it largely depends on what happens in the next two games. Really, the game on Saturday. Malik Thomas has been the best scorer in the WCC all year long. He is someone who can take over a game. We've seen him do it on the road. We've seen him do it away. We've seen him do it everywhere. Malik Thomas is capable of carrying a team on his back. But you need to be able to do it against some of these better teams. And he has done it against St. Mary's. That was an opportunity that they had, that they were able to cash in on. And it was, yes, 1 point game or whatever else. Malik Thomas in that game was a little bit better than he was in the first one. He did have 11 points, but there wasn't a whole lot of offense in that game where you score only 65 total for the game. But this is if he has the big breakout kill shot of the Zags on Saturday, that he goes for 25, something like that. I think he is going to end up being the pick because of what we've seen in the totality of that season. And in my scenario that this happens, they end up the 2 seed. If someone can, other than Gonzaga, St. Mary's can end up the 2 seed, I think that says a lot about what their season has been overall. Again, I mentioned about, like, if that happens, I would maybe Gerlitsen is going to have a case to be made for WCC Coach of the Year. If USF can win their last 2 games, I think you have to give serious consideration to Malik Thomas for Player of the Year. But if I'm filling out a ballot today, FYI, asterisk, I don't have a vote in any of this. So this is my own personal opinion on all of this stuff. Right now, to me, Player of the Year is Augustas Marciulionis. If Gonzaga loses to USF, and Malik Thomas is a big part of the reason why that happens on Saturday, I might lean Malik Thomas on that front. But the rest of the awards, Mitchell Saxon, DPOY. Right now, it's Randy Bennett for Coach of the Year, unless a big upset happens. Not a big upset, but if USF or Santa Clara were able to knock off the Zags this week, I think that starts to lean it a little bit more. Newcomer, Paulus Morauskas. Freshman, I think it's Austin Rapp. I think he's done enough to prove himself in that category. Sixth man of the year, as great as Elijah Mahi has been this season, Mikey Lewis does feel like a true sixth man, what you would think of in the traditional sense, and he has been great in that role for the Gaels all year long. All right. Again, we have a slate of games. We start on Tuesday with Gonzaga at Santa Clara, Wednesday, San Francisco at Oregon State, Thursday, the slate of 3, St. Mary's at LMU, Pepperdine at Portland, and San Diego at Washington State. A ton still to be decided about what we're going to see for Las Vegas. 7 of the seeds still to be decided. Only St. Mary's at the 1, Pepperdine at the 9, Pacific at the 10, and San Diego at 11 are locked in. And we are looking at a final week of WCC action, a WCC regular season action. And guess what? March is less than 1 week away. All right, well, I'll do it for this episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow along on social media at Post by Zach and at unofficial WCC Pod. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will catch you later.